Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are strapping in for a really deep descent into a narrative that is, less about romance and way more about rupture.
Oh, for sure.
We're talking about Scarlett St. Clair's A Touch of Malice, and we're not just, reading the plot. We're really trying to analyze the foundation.
Exactly.
We have a powerful stack of sources here. Raw, really visceral narrative excerpts that detail these intense character transformations. And they're coupled with some crucial authorial commentary that, it provides the mythological blueprint for the war that's coming.
It's an essential deep dive, really, for anyone who's looking to understand where this entire story cycle just pivots. This isn't just another fantasy sequel.
No.
This is the moment where the main character, Persephone, sheds that skin of the victim and really dons the mantle of the warrior.
Yeah.
We're charting this massive geopolitical conflict, this sort of modernization of god-mortal tensions and the extremely high emotional cost of her ascent to power.
Absolutely. Our mission today is to give you the ultimate shortcut to being, really informed about the core conflicts here. We are going to unpack the massive and often terrifying themes of power, grief, and crucially, vengeance.
And how they all connect.
Yes, exactly. We will examine how the author meticulously reimagined these ancient mythological underpinnings, particularly the inherent sort of cyclical violence of the Titanomachy, to set the stage for a dramatic, world-altering war and Persephone's definitive and kind of terrifying transformation into a true queen.
We're basically synthesizing how trauma in this world doesn't just shape destiny. It becomes the very source of power. So, let's just jump right in.
Okay, so we start, as the sources do, right in the crucible of personal pain. Specifically, the lingering shadow of Perseus. Persephone is, she is fundamentally changed by her trauma.
She is.
She is haunted, dreaming nightly that Perseus is still harming her, even after he's been captured. This isn't just, narrative tension. This is the reality of PTSD manifesting in a divine being.
That's the key analytical point right there. The trauma isn't just a historical event for her. It's a constant active presence. And what's deeply compelling is how Hades, the god of the dead, reacts to this ongoing psychological burden.
Right.
He feels this immense guilt for failing to rescue her. He blames himself for her suffering, and that guilt, instead of being turned inward, it just gets projected outward as frustration and, anger.
We see that projection almost immediately, and it strikes at Persephone's, very meager support system, Zuphi, her Amazon Aegis.
Yeah.
Hades actually attempts to punish Zuphi, believing the shame of the failure should fall on the protector who couldn't prevent the trauma.
But Zuphi's position as a protector who did fail, it just highlights how deeply this event has wounded the entire power structure around Persephone, including Hades, and his own belief in his protective abilities.
It all culminates in what is, I think you could argue, the most defining and, frankly, the darkest moment for Persephone's character arc, the raw act of retribution against Perseus. When she visits him in his confinement, she uses her burgeoning power, which is now explicitly linked to her rage, to torture him until he dies.
And the source material is just. It is unflinching in describing the intensity of this moment. She uses her powers of nature, something usually associated with growth and life, to cause this visceral, painful death.
And she's so specific. She desires for him to burn for having wanted to use his cock as a weapon. It is an act of justice that's just intertwined with this deeply personal, primal need for vengeance against sexual violence.
This is where we really need to slow down and analyze the psychological weight of this. Right. Hades is watching this horrific act.
He's just standing there.
The source describes him as simply stating the torture will last until he dies, with an expression of almost complete disinterest. Now, is Hades just, allowing the necessary vengeance? Or is he actually sanctioning her descent into darkness? It's a terrifying ambiguity.
I think the silence is the answer. By accepting it, by allowing it to happen, he implicitly validates the darkness of her power.
I think so too.
And the sources confirm the immediate psychological toll on Persephone herself. She is fully aware of the cost. She recognizes that this violence wilts a part of her, acknowledging that if she continued down this path, the rest of her would wither away.
Exactly. This is her first major step towards self-corruption. But here's the dichotomy. In that same breath, she makes this deliberate, defining declaration. I am Persephone, future queen of the underworld, lady of your fate. She uses the act of extinguishing life to assert dominion over her own. The revenge might wither her soul, but it simultaneously hardens her resolve, transforming trauma into power. It's a queen being born, but one paid for with the integrity of her moral compass.
So we establish really early on that her power is tied directly to her darkness and her pain. But her struggles aren't singular. We transition pretty immediately into the theme of a touch of grief, dealing with the loss of Lexa.
And this ongoing grief, it keeps her human, or at least it keeps the moral Persephone alive alongside this nascent queen. We see Lexa's soul residing in Elysium. We get this beautifully painful detail about a white quilt embroidered with blue forget-me-nots gifted by an older soul named Alma.
The forget-me-nots, they symbolize true love, faithfulness, enduring memories. It's all meant for Lexa. It's such a small, tender detail, but it speaks volumes about the enduring nature of mortal connection even after death.
But it's not a comfort.
No. When Persephone visits Lexa, the comfort is minimal. Lexa is paler, she's dressed in white, which is a color Persephone knows Lexa never wore in life.
The physical distance is really a metaphor for the finality of their separation. Even as queen, Persephone cannot fully breach that barrier. She notes that the grief, just like the nightmares of Pirithous, is an active force, constantly chipping away at her.
And that emotional weight, it provides the constant fuel for her desire to exert control, to stop loss from ever happening again. And while she's dealing with this intense internal conflict, we pivot to the absolute mundane wedding planning. But even a discussion of lilac and green color schemes is fraught with political tension, mostly thanks to Zeus.
The domestic conversation, it serves as this jarring contrast to the immense stakes. Persephone prefers the simpler, more natural symbolism of anemone and narcissus flowers tied to her own story, and she wants a simple ceremony in Hades' garden, rejecting the grand ballroom Eurie suggested.
It shows her inherent resistance to the spectacle of divine politics, even as she's being pulled right into the middle of it.
Exactly.
But the central conflict here is the stunning revelation that Zeus has not approved the marriage. This isn't just a formality, it's a potential political catastrophe that Hades kept secret.
This is a huge point of contention, a critical fissure in their relationship. Hades admits he intended to withhold this information until he had no other choice, because he was afraid that Zeus would just drag them to Olympus and create this agonizing public spectacle, delaying the marriage indefinitely, which he wanted to spare her from.
But the consequences of that secrecy are immediately apparent. Persephone's devastated.
Utterly.
She confronts him, emphasizing her right to agency. If their entire future hangs on the whim of Zeus, she has to know the stakes. Hades' old habit of trying to manage and protect the world around her rather than allowing her agency within it creates these significant trust issues just as she is demanding to become a powerful equal partner.
It adds another crucial layer of vulnerability. She feels isolated and undermined even by the person who loves her most. And this emotional strain, it immediately bleeds into the public sphere with the revelation of Adonis's murder.
Right. Adonis is found brutally murdered outside La Rose, and while Persephone had this, previous negative history with him, he stole her work, was physically aggressive, threatened her. Hades immediately recognizes this as a calculated political act.
Hades suspects the killer, or killers, hate all divinity, not just Aphrodite, whose favored mortal Adonis was. The murder was planned with intention, suggesting a broader, targeted campaign. It's not just a single act of violence, it's a declaration of war against the entire divine hierarchy, signaling that even those associated with the gods are not safe.
And the public sentiment mirrors this escalating hostility. The media coverage is intense. Headlines deliberately pit the engagement, a symbol of divine union, against the storm of the century, which is Demeter's creation.
The Grecian Times opinion column, it just solidifies the anti-god narrative. It explicitly calls the harsh winter divine punishment. This shows the power of the anti-god groups, likely the impious or triad, in shaping public opinion. They're effectively weaponizing divine misery against the gods themselves.
And Persephone is no longer immune to this public hostility. This leads directly to the coffee incident. She is just trying to exist in the upper world when a mortal woman accosts her, calling her a lemming, a blind follower of the gods, and pours scalding hot coffee directly into her lap.
The physical injury is severe. We're talking serious burns. But the psychological reaction from her protector, Xuphi, is what truly illustrates the tension.
Oh, yeah.
Xuphi draws her massive sword instantly, stopping the blade inches from the woman's neck. And when Persephone orders her to stand down, Xuphi is furious, arguing, it's not murder, it's retribution.
That line is so telling. It's Xuphi mirroring Persephone's earlier sentiment against Pirithous. The rules of mortal society, the necessity of standing down, are actively preventing Xuphi from fulfilling her mandate as a protector. It highlights the Amazonian frustration with the limits placed on divine power in the modern world.
And Hades arrives and heals the burns immediately, demonstrating his power, but Persephone makes the critical connection. She links the public aggression, the woman's willingness to commit violence, to the organized attacks on favored mortals like Adonis. She recognizes that simply being associated with Hades makes her a target, a symbol of everything the mortals despise.
And that ultimately feeds her growing desire for power and self-protection. She realizes that external healing, Hades' constant protection, it's not sufficient. She needs the internal fortitude to stop the attack before it happens, or to ensure that the cost of attacking her is absolutely too high. This moves us perfectly into part 2, where this localized personal conflict just explodes into a full-scale political war.
As we transition into part 2, the threat transitions from disorganized public outrage to a highly structured, politically motivated insurgency. We are talking about the anti-God movement known as Triad, which is not just an angry mob, it's a sophisticated operation.
And the source material immediately names the leader. Theseus, the demigod son of Poseidon, he appears in Hades' office, this figure of immense influence and control. This choice of leadership, a demigod, it's so politically potent because he has one foot in the divine world and one in the mortal.
It gives Triad legitimacy. Theseus denies direct involvement in the specific attacks, but his refusal to divulge the names of Harmonia's attackers strongly suggests he is responsible through command, or at the very least, through condoning their actions. His aim is clearly to destabilize Olympus.
And to understand why Triad is gaining so much traction, we have to look at their philosophy, which is detailed explicitly in an opinion column in the Grecian Times. They assert that the gods cannot be trusted, and that mortals must question the divine right to rule.
This is critical. Triad is not an organization motivated purely by chaos or spite. It is fueled by legitimate, systemic grievances rooted in divine negligence and hypocrisy. They aim to force change and offer protection where the gods fail. And the example cited is the most damning of all. Healing a man suffering from cancer after Apollo, the god of healing, ignored his desperate prayers and sacrifices.
That is the perfect propaganda, isn't it? It frames the gods as self-interested, prioritizing spectacle and power over their core responsibilities to humanity. Triad is effectively saying, we can do the gods' job better than they can, and we care more. That legitimacy is what makes them so dangerous. They are filling the theological gap left wide open by Olympian arrogance.
And we see the brutal consequences of this conflict escalating onto the divine hierarchy itself with the attack on Harmonia, the goddess of harmony and Aphrodite's sister. This is where the narrative really earns the title, A Touch of Terror.
Harmonia is found severely beaten, barely managing to teleport to Aphrodite's study. The sheer terror of the moment comes from the fact that the attackers, who wore these white masks with gaping mouths, just a visually disturbing detail, they found a way to subdue Harmonia's power.
That is a massive turning point.
Huge.
It shows mortals or demigods aligned with them now possess the means to nullify divine authority.
And the nature of the attack itself is so symbolic. She was held down with a knee on her spine, a gesture of deliberate humiliation and superiority, while her horns were sawed off. They used broken things as weapons and told her she was being punished for being something she couldn't help. This is targeted, ritualistic violence.
Hades confirms the psychological aim. The attackers wanted to prove that gods are expendable, that they can be dismantled, mutilated, and discarded. It strips away the inherent invulnerability that gods have always relied upon, throwing the entire divine world into an existential crisis.
So in the face of this terror, Aphrodite, who is rarely seen as vulnerable, she asks Persephone to investigate both Adonis and Harmonia's attacks. She recognizes Persephone's unique position.
Yeah, she argues that Persephone fits in as a mortal and a journalist, suggesting she could gain the enemy's trust or even turn them to her cause. She can cross the line between the divine and mortal in a way that no Olympian ever could.
But Hades, still reeling from the coffee incident and his own perceived failure with Pirithous, he immediately forbids it. He is clearly terrified of putting her in danger again.
Of course.
But this is the moment Persephone takes agency. She recognizes that to be queen, she cannot hide. She later agrees to investigate with Hades' knowledge, understanding that this is the dangerous work required to secure their world.
Her decision to accept that risk comes at the same time that she receives this eerie, foreboding prophecy from then Sibyl's soon-to-be boyfriend, who claims to be an oracle.
And Ben quotes a television show, Leonidas, which gives it this immediately unsettling, almost modern, casual feeling of doom. The prophecy states, "You've lost and you will lose again. The loss of one friend will lead you to lose many, and you will cease to shine, an ember taken by the night."
Sybil and Hermes, they just quickly dismiss him, arguing he's a false prophet, possibly fed information by an impious entity, which suggests Triad might be deliberately seeding misinformation through lower-level oracles. Hermes just teleports Ben away to quell the rising hysteria.
But the betrayal Ben foreshadowed, it manifests so quickly through Helen, Persephone's friend and colleague at the Advocate. Helen secretly reaches out to Triad and secures an interview with a High Lord.
Helen has clearly undergone a political conversion. She argues that Persephone is misguided for not seeing that the guides must be held accountable. She's seen the evidence, the man healed of cancer, and she believes Triad's narrative that conflict is necessary to dismantle the guides' unchecked power.
This is a profound moment of personal betrayal, directly validating the loss of one friend, part of the prophecy. Persephone is forced to have Zophi physically remove Helen from the office. The cost of aligning herself with Hades is the complete fracturing of her mortal life and friendships, leaving her increasingly reliant only on the divine.
And the threats are mounting, and the trauma is fueling her, and she knows she needs power that is intentional, not just reactive. This is where Hecate, the formidable lady of Tartarus, steps in as a brutal mentor.
Hecate serves as the ancient voice of truth, confirming that Demeter's current actions are not random. They are part of a historical, cyclical pattern. As she puts it, she is not the first god to attempt to overthrow her kind.
Right. Hecate understands the stakes better than anyone.
Hecate's entire goal is to transition Persephone from drawing accidental, rage-fueled power to wielding intentional, controlled power. She stresses that Persephone is running out of time and needs to prepare for war.
The training methods reflect this urgency. They are absolutely brutal. She orders Nephili, the Amazon commander, to attack Persephone without mercy.
Unbelievable.
Later, she forces Persephone to intentionally cut her own hand, forcing her to rely on self-healing magic. Hecate is teaching her that mastery requires self-inflicted pain and control over the healing process.
But the most intense moment is when Hecate hurls black fire at Persephone in the underworld. This forces Persephone to teleport and use her power defensively and offensively, all at the same time. Hecate demands to know what Persephone wants because, as she says, your magic is reactive, more than likely due to trauma, and while that is not your fault, we are running out of time.
And this mentorship, it brings Persephone's greatest fear to the surface. She confesses her growing worry to Hades. "I do not flinch at torture. I wish for vengeance more than healing."
Wow.
She recognizes she's drawing power from darkness and anger, fearing she will become precisely like her rage-filled mother Demeter or fall victim to the same violent impulses she used on Pirithous.
Hecate's lesson is essentially, power derived from negative emotions is inevitable in war, but true queens learn to harness that darkness intentionally, preventing it from consuming them. Persephone's walking a razor's edge here, learning to flirt with corruption for the sake of survival.
And that leads us directly into the massive mythological foundation of this conflict. Because to understand Persephone's fear of becoming like Demeter, we need to understand Demeter's own profound trauma, which is the cornerstone of this entire war.
Right. Part 3 is where we pivot from personal drama to this deep, systemic, mythological context. The sources make it undeniably clear that Demeter's rage is not a side effect of the story. It is the deliberate engine of this conflict, and her influence is woven into the Triad attacks.
Persephone visits her mother's temple, the Temple of Sangri, and immediately senses this ancient, powerful magic there, a magic far older and stronger than the newer generation of gods. Hades confirms that Demeter's actions follow a pattern. Whenever a new god or power rises that she opposes, she attempts to overthrow her kind, triggering a historical cycle of chaos.
And the connection between the Olympian and the anti-god movement becomes concrete through Harmonia's testimony. She confirmed that during the attack, she sensed Demeter's magic described as warm like spring sun, smelling of golden wheat on the net that was used to ensnare her.
This is a direct act of treason against Olympus. As Hecate noted, a lesser goddess like Harmonia would stand little chance against an ancient Olympian's magic. Demeter is lending her overwhelming power to mortal agents to do the dirty work of dismantling her own family.
And the tragic death of Tyche, the goddess of fortune, further links Demeter to the systemic violence. Tyche dies from an unhealing wound, and after being placed in the underworld's children's garden, she speaks to Persephone.
Tyche initially tells Persephone that Demeter was physically present during her death and that her thread was cut by the fates, suggesting a cosmic, irreversible end. But the pivotal revelation she shares is deeply personal and utterly reframes Demeter's entire motivation.
That revelation is profound. Demeter was raped by Poseidon. This horrific, unacknowledged trauma caused Demeter to hide Persephone and retract from the world, linking her current political rage and attempt to destabilize Olympus directly to profound, unhealed personal trauma and the abusive, patriarchal behavior of the Olympian kings.
This single detail transforms Demeter from a selfish, overbearing mother into a victim fighting against systemic injustice. Her rage, while devastating, is entirely logical given the context. She is seeking to dismantle a system Olympus that has shielded abusers like Poseidon and Zeus and refused to acknowledge her suffering. It's a brilliant way to weaponize classical mythology for modern thematic effect.
However, Hades has to clarify a crucial technical detail about Tyche's death, moving the narrative back from mythological trauma to the immediate danger of war. Her thread was not cut by the fates.
Which means?
Which means Triad has acquired something far more dangerous. A specific weapon capable of killing gods and preventing their natural, immediate healing.
And Hades strongly suspects this weapon is Hydra venom. This shifts the scale of the conflict entirely. They aren't fighting angry mortals, they are fighting an enemy armed with ancient, pertinent, divine weaponry.
And the source material gives us the key context for this venom. The Hydra resides in Lerna Lake, which is a known entrance to the underworld. Hades explains that the venom is potent enough to slow divine healing, and if a god is stabbed multiple times, it can lead to death.
This detail provides the justification for why powerful, high-level gods like Harmonia and Tyche could not simply regenerate. Triad has effectively found the Achilles heel of the divine world, confirming that the anti-god movement is not just ideological, it is militarily equipped to win a war.
And here is where the author's notes provide the ultimate analytical context, confirming that the entire conflict is intentionally structured as a mythological echo chamber. The author explicitly states they set up the Demeter storm and the Triad unrest to trigger a new Titanomachy, the cycle of overthrowing the current divine rulers.
The modern relevance here is brilliant. The author chose the paralyzing snowstorm over the mythological drought Demeter caused intentionally, because, as the source notes, technology could combat drought easier than it could combat a snowstorm. This links the mythological power to modern infrastructure vulnerability, demonstrating that the gods are targeting mortal weaknesses specific to the 21st century.
The snowstorm itself is also tied to the Doso myth, where Demeter wanders disguised as an old woman. So, we see the author weaving ancient myths into a contemporary political crisis, using the disguise to illustrate Demeter's infiltration and manipulation of the mortal world to achieve her goals.
And let's also talk about the profound weight behind Hecate. The sources mention that Hecate's potential to castrate Zeus, a serious ancient punishment, is directly linked to Cronus castrating Uranus, his own father, in the original mythological cycle.
That is a staggering mythological flex. It establishes Hecate's authority over the king of the gods as being rooted in the most ancient foundational power structure, the overthrow of patriarchal divine rule. It explains why Zeus respects her and why she is the ideal mentor to teach Persephone how to wield transformative systemic power.
And we cannot overlook the layers of meaning behind Theseus, the leader of Triad. In the sources, we learn that the Minotaur is kept in the depths of Hades' palace, which was once the palace of Knossos, originally mistaken for the labyrinth.
Right.
And Theseus, who killed the Minotaur in myth, a creature born of divine misbehavior, is now leading the charge against the divine establishment.
The message is crystal clear. The person whose ancient purpose was to kill the monster born of divine scandal is now leading the political movement to kill the gods responsible for the ongoing scandals. It creates a deep, satisfying symmetry within the narrative.
And finally, the author provides quick context on other monsters. Lamia, cursed by Hera to devour children, Scio, primordial goddess of sea monsters used by Demeter, and Arachne, who weaves the misdeeds of the gods and now resides in Tartarus. These are just background details. They are ancient factors of trauma and divine misbehavior, reinforcing that the systemic corruption fueling Triad is centuries old and rooted in Olympian cruelty.
This mythological backdrop makes the impending war inevitable. It is not a sudden conflict. It is the long-deferred reckoning for centuries of divine hypocrisy and systemic abuse, all triggered by a single mortal-god relationship.
With the god-killing weapon identified and Demeter confirmed as a high-level collaborator, the conflict escalates into open warfare. Hades, understanding the political necessity of confronting the Olympians, brings Persephone to Olympus to attend the council meeting.
This is a huge symbolic moment for Persephone. She is stepping onto Olympus, but Hades gives her the Helm of Darkness, which grants invisibility, ensuring her physical safety while allowing her to hear the debate. She is present, a queen in training, but protected from the direct hostility of the council.
And the council meeting is jest, a brilliant showcase of divine hypocrisy. Zeus and Hera primarily blame Hades and Persephone's relationship for Demeter's actions, viewing their love as the trigger for the political chaos, rather than acknowledging their own systemic failures.
Zeus, in particular, demonstrates the exact arrogance that fuels Triad, stating that the mortals need to be taught a lesson, and perhaps freezing to death will remind them who rules their world.
Unbelievable.
This is precisely the kind of divine negligence that Triad was founded to oppose.
And Persephone uses the Helm of Darkness perfectly. She speaks while invisible, forcing them to address the true threat. She accuses Demeter of working with demigods, a charge serious enough to force the Olympians to shift focus from blaming Hades. Zeus, faced with this new, immediate problem, defers judgment on the marriage, buying them the time they desperately need.
And they seize that window of opportunity. They realize the necessity of securing their bond immediately, especially given the oracle's earlier warning about Zeus and Hera planning to seize any child born from their union. So that very night, Persephone and Hades marry secretly on Olympus, in the baths.
Hecate conducts the ceremony, ensuring its legitimacy but also its absolute secrecy. The wedding itself becomes an act of rebellion against the king of the gods, a necessary move to protect their future and their bond against political machinations.
And Hades solidifies their union with a gift that is both intimate and politically powerful: the chains of truth.
Let's analyze the symbolism of this gift for a second. The chains of truth are a powerful binding weapon against any god, meant for high-stakes protection or interrogation. But Hades immediately gives Persephone the password, Eleftheros ton.
Greek her, set him free.
Right. And he explains that the chains only draw the pleasure truth from the wearer.
The implication is massive. In a relationship that was previously plagued by Hades' protective secrecy, like the whole Zeus revelation, this gift signifies his commitment to absolute transparency, even intimacy. The binding weapon becomes a tool for mutual emotional security, ensuring that their bond is founded on the very truth that Hades previously withheld.
It's a recognition of Persephone's demand for agency and honesty.
The quiet wedding is the necessary pause before the chaos. The war returns with full force at the Panhellenic Games during the chariot races, where Triad launches a major, devastating attack, resulting in 160 mortal deaths.
And the sources show the raw power and vengeance of the gods on full display here. Aphrodite, who had been hiding the truth about a planned rally to protect her image, kills a mortal by literally tearing out his heart, a shocking and violent display of retribution.
And Ares attacks her in retaliation, escalating the divine internal conflict.
And crucially, Persephone is injured by a shard from a hydra venom-tipped spear. Her reaction here confirms her mastery over the darkness she feared. She heals herself not through instinctive regeneration, but by intentionally channeling her power to soothe the fiery pain, imagining her magic as cool and crisp, a kiss of frost in early spring.
She takes that dark power she learned from Hecate and deliberately channels it into creation and defense, not pure rage.
But the apex of the personal cost arrives when Theseus appears in Hades' office. The ultimate demand is made. He sends a box to Persephone's office containing Sibyl's severed finger. He demands the favor Hades owes him for previously returning a powerful relic.
And that favor is Persephone herself. This demands Hades face the ultimate decision: his love versus the sanctity of the underworld. Hades is overcome by fury, preparing for divine death, a suicidal confrontation with Nemesis, screaming that he will destroy Zeus for allowing this situation to develop.
But Persephone stops him, recalling the false memories of his death that Hecate implanted during her training. She binds Hades with her own vines and magic, angering him to the ground, recognizing that she must protect him from facing Nemesis and certain destruction. It is a total role reversal, where the once protected now sacrifices herself to protect her guardian. She leaves with Theseus to save Hades and Sibyl.
The abduction is terrifying. Theseus is threatening to cut off Sibyl's fingers and toes for any misbehavior, and he delivers the final political bombshell. Hera is secretly on Triad's side. The division on Olympus is now official. The Queen of the Gods is conspiring against her own husband.
And they enter the underworld via a lake entrance, guarded by the primordial goddess Ceto, the queen of sea monsters. Demeter is waiting, seeking passage to Hades' arsenal. Persephone, despite being bound and abducted, exercises her authority as queen of the underworld, commanding Ceto to stop fighting Demeter and demanding the primordial goddess rescue Sibyl and Harmonia, who are struggling in the water.
This command is her full assertion of sovereignty. She uses her title to enforce order, even over ancient primal beings. And then we witness her zenith of power.
Oh, yeah.
Fueled by fury, determination, and the intentional dark magic Kate taught her, Persephone releases a massive, world-altering wave of magic in the upper world. This wave causes the ice and snow to melt instantly, sprouting flowers and greenery, repairing buildings, and completely transforming the landscape back into a fragrant, colorful forest.
She literally splits the sky. This is not just massive creative power, it is destructive, world-shaping power, demonstrating that she has achieved a level of divine authority that rivals or surpasses most Olympians.
And the battle against Olympus is instantaneous. Zeus, Hera, and Ares attack her. She fights them, successfully absorbing Zeus's powerful violet lightning, the symbol of his ultimate patriarchal authority, and channeling it back at him, forcing the king of the gods to retreat.
This single act absorbing and weaponizing Zeus's lightning is the symbolic overthrow of Olympus. It demonstrates that Persephone has not just achieved parity, but momentary dominance over the king of the gods. And Hephaestus intervenes at the last moment, roaring in defense of Aphrodite, saving her from the fighting and cementing his loyalty to his wife over his familial ties.
Olympus has fractured completely.
Completely.
But the victory is costly and incomplete. While Persephone is engaged in this dramatic confrontation, Theseus escapes the arsenal with the Helm of Darkness. The war has claimed its final, most valuable prize.
And the underworld shakes violently, confirming the imminent total war. Triad now possesses a god-killing weapon, the Hydra Venom and Hades' most powerful artifact for infiltration in war. The immediate threat is not just external, but deeply internal. The enemy can now enter the underworld undetected.
The cost has been immense. 160 mortals dead, a friend abducted and mutilated, a massive trust breach between the couple and with Olympus, and the tools necessary to win the coming Titanomachy are now in the hands of the mortals.
What an explosive and psychologically demanding journey. Persephone began this deep dive, haunted by personal trauma, feeling like a victim defined by what happened to her.
Right.
She concluded it as an intentional wielder of immense, volatile power, capable of facing the king of the gods and literally reshaping the world.
Her transformation is complete, but it's messy. She has learned to channel the darkness and rage she feared, transforming it into these world-altering acts of creation and retribution. She has gone from the vulnerable daughter Demeter tried to hide to the queen capable of fighting her rage-filled mother to a standstill, securing her future through self-sacrifice and sheer power.
And the underlying theme, as the author confirms, is that the cycle of power, the Titanomachy, is continuing. This cycle is not random. It's spurred by the gods' catastrophic refusal to address the mortal world's legitimate grievances, the systemic abuse and negligence that birthed both Demeter's rage and Triad's philosophy. The new war is the deferred consequence of old crimes.
The essential question moving forward is whether Persephone, as the queen of the dead and newly married, can use her immense volatile power to break that cycle of violence, or if her acceptance of retaliatory dark magic will only solidify the old violent patterns of control and bloodshed in the war to come.
I mean, she chose vengeance over healing back in part 1. Now she has to prove that choice was worth the price.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you, the learner. Given that the Hydra Venom is now confirmed as a god-killing weapon in the hands of the anti-divine Triad, and the ultimate tool of infiltration, the Helm of Darkness, has been stolen, how do you think Hades and Persephone will use their new marriage bond, the powerful, truth-binding chains and Persephone's volatile new power to ensure they, and the world they are now married to protect, survive the inevitable next phase of war? Does the chains of truth mean absolute political transparency, or is it a vulnerability?
The stakes couldn't be higher, and the tools they possess are double-edged. We thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the cost of becoming a queen.
We'll see you next time.